Okay, are you ready for this one? We had a discussion with a Christian upon a particular subject on Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And as you know, the Christians believe that Jesus is God. I mean, this is what they believe. Well, majority of the Christians anyway, although there are different sects in Christianity who believe that He's only the Son and so forth. But generally, they do believe He is God. And we raised a question to a Christian on Jonathan McLachlan's page, who happens to be a supporter of him. And so his name is Thomas Lawrence. And it's really disappointing, actually, because when you look at his comments and so forth, you can go through it. He's a really bad-mouthed Christian. He has very little manners, behaves ridiculously vile, and so forth, because he obviously was buckled over our question, and it basically started from Jonathan's post, which is, he quotes, as you can see in the screen, he says, "How can Christianity got started versus other religions and false gods? It is clear that Jesus had everything happen publicly and out in the open, so there would be no doubt as to the truth of who He was." So basically, Jonathan's argument was, posting the video, that, you know, everything is attested according to the Bible. There was public evidence, there was biblical attestations and so forth. But, you know, we've actually written an article, you can actually see it below this video, we'll post it, where the witnesses of the Bible were not first-hand witnesses. And you can see the evidence refuting the Christian apologists on this. In saying that, my dear brother Akil, who's basically a Muslim apologist, he's actually got an upcoming debate with a Christian, and we'll actually post the advertisement below this video too, so you can see it. It's coming very soon on the topic, does the Quran approve of the Bible? But let's see what Brother Akil has said, and he's using a different nickname under Radush. So basically he makes a very good question against Christianity, and we'll go through the rebuttals and the responses with Thomas Lawrence. So basically the brother says, and this is his question against the Christian faith, he says, "How comical an assertion, given that we know next to nothing about the life of Jesus prior to. For 33 years, there is almost nothing known about Him for 30 years. And in those 3 years, we only have recorded a few days to weeks of His life. Yet you want us to believe this religion was founded upon being public. We have no idea who really wrote the 4 Gospels, yet you want us to believe that it was founded upon being public. For 30 to 50 years after the departure of Jesus from the earth, we have little to no idea how His message was carried on, yet you want us to believe it was founded upon being public. Christians don't know if the message Jesus preached was through inspiration or physical revelation, yet you want us to believe it was founded upon being public." Nice sales, and yeah, so it's a very good question actually, and I've thought about this too for a while, and I do want to concentrate on why the life of Jesus is basically non-existent before His ministry. So I continued to raise this question to see if we can get a reaction from the Christians, and it got the attention of one Christian missionary, and we will go through that dialogue. So So basically I came along and I said, that's true. I said they boast about how they have 5,000 manuscripts and how Christianity is so well documented and attested, yet there is only 1% of Jesus' life recorded before his ministry on the 5,000 manuscripts. Why is that? I would love to know what this God did before his ministry. Was he an alcoholic? Was he a womanizer? Was he a bully? Did he do what teenagers do? How is it possible that this God, who is meant to be the greatest man on earth, his biography is missing prior to his ministry? I asked these questions and I basically got nothing. So of course a Christian now comes to the stage. His name is Thomas Lawrence. Of course, completely red herring. He goes off topic, and this is what they do. They go to attack Islam, right? So he speaks about, and the Quran that came 600 years later has better accounts of Jesus, let alone every other person you call a prophet. Dumbass. Look, he's actually starting to use foul words straight away. I mean, this is the Jesus disciples, the disciple followers. These are the modern day disciples. Look at the language already. I mean, when we raise such questions, I mean, why do you have to be so nasty? Why can't you be a representative of Christ? And this is what happens when we raise critical questions. They get upset and start going cuckoo. But so basically he's saying, the Quran came 600 years later. He's basically completely ignoring the question. So then he goes down, and we'll go really quickly through this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just summarize exactly the exchange. So then he talks about the biggest mistake the Western world has ever made is to think that Muslims and non-Muslims can coexist. So basically he's just going off topic. He's not, look at him. He's even going into murder, extortation, gangster, pedophilia. He's just completely lost his mind now. He's not really addressing the question. So I basically said to him, you sound angry that 2/3 of Jesus' life is basically missing. I really want to know, was he a criminal? Was he a good guy? What was he, before his ministry? And look, he comes back and he says, and Allah picked up the missing pieces of Jesus after 600 years and leading people astray in falsehood. What a joke. Hell yeah, I am angered. He's apparently angered, he says. He says, for one, I don't like you people, and I can't for the life of me understanding how anyone with their right mind and full access to your sources could think Muhammad was a good man. He's going back to Muhammad. The discussion is not Muhammad. He should be, discussing and answering his Bible, right? Why is this God missing? Why is his life missing? And so, he just goes on and on and on. So basically I came back and I said to Thomas Lawrence, I said to him, you still sound angry. A 600-year later book had to fill in some of those Christian missing gaps. So tell us why your manuscripts missing almost a lifetime of Jesus' life. This amazingly attested book. So he comes back and he says, no follower of Jesus needs the Quran to explain anything about him. Your Quran has no authority or reverence to the book before it in its use. So again, he's going on about pedophilia. He's not even addressing the question. He keeps going, your overrated book needs volumes and editions. He's going again to attack the Quran. Absolutely nothing, he's just going on and on. I think in his last paragraph he says, the most important aspects of Jesus' life are already in the gospel. Okay, so he's come back to at least give us some feedback that apparently the most important aspects of Jesus' life are already in the gospel. And then he rants on about more abuse against the Prophet Muhammad. It's got nothing to do with the subject. So So my response back to him was, if Jesus was just a man, I agree. We don't need to know the rest of his life story, I agree. But since he's God sent to earth, you don't find it problematic of God's missing biography before his ministry? Doesn't sound like an important God at all. I would have liked to know what this God got up to for 27 to 30 missing years of his life. I mean, wouldn't you? Imagine God comes to the world in the year 2016 and we don't record anything except him coming to the earth, and we forget him for the next 26 to 30 years. Doesn't make sense, does it? So he comes back and he writes and he says, hey dummy, again, more insults from the Christian. God is revealed and ultimately unveiled throughout the entire Bible, compiled over thousands of years, that starts with the story of creation and terminates at the end of days. God didn't start existing when his word entered creation in the person of Jesus. So just to summarize, what he's basically saying is, hey, we don't believe that God came first with Jesus. There's a whole entire Old Testament where apparently God is mentioned. But my response to him was, yeah, I know about your God in both Moses and Abraham's time. He was quite barbaric. Even David Wood was ashamed of this God's behavior. He said the Old Testament makes him feel uncomfortable. But then Mr. Wood says, it's okay, we have the New Testament, where Jesus, unlike the Old Testament, taught peace and love. However, we don't know if Jesus taught peace in the first 27 to 30 odd years of his life. We only have a recording in the last 3 years of his life. Maybe Jesus was a brat and Christians were a bit shameful to record those missing 27 to 30 years. Apparently there is information in Christian historical records Christians deem unauthentic. Jesus as a boy pushed over another boy off a cliff and killed him. And some say he punched the boy, whatever it is. I guess this may explain why Christians felt it wasn't necessary to record his early life. That's what I basically said to him. He comes back, more insults. He says, dummy, that God you tie your colt to also tests to his barbarity when placing judgment on nations. You're telling me that you don't recognize a worldwide flood, plagues in Egypt and Sodom and Gomorrah that wiped out vegetations, animals, women and children, going against your propagandized rules of war. And he goes on to say Jesus is judge, and when he returns and when people and all nations face judgment, it's going to be pretty. So basically what he's saying is that, that's the barbaricness of God in the Old Testament. That's just, part of God's judgment and so forth. So he's actually missing the point here. So we're going to go and respond to him. I said to him, yes, specifically ordering to stick swords into babies and children in 1 Samuel 15:3 and Numbers 31, is Jesus' wrath and judgment on children? So I'm wondering, what judgment did Jesus do in the New Testament in the first 27 to 30 years? Oops, we don't have them. But what we do have is other historical evidence showing Jesus not so peaceful as a young godly teenager. Christians conveniently deem them unauthentic. I wonder why. The way I see it, since Christians don't have a recording of Jesus' life before his ministry, early adult life to teenage life, means that he had a very bad life. And the fact that other historical records testified to that tells me it wasn't a lie. Otherwise, Christians would have recorded it. I think it's dishonesty not to record his early life. Thomas writes back, he says, "You're damn right that the Canaanites deserved everything coming their way, and they weren't even fully human. They were Nephilims. They worshipped Baal and murdered infants to them, had orgies in their blood, procreated future generations that did the same." So basically what he's doing is, Thomas is going and saying, oh look, the God of the Old Testament, who is Jesus, it was justified. These people used to worship, other evil gods and so forth, right? So he's basically saying it was justified that Jesus killed them. So I said to him, so when Moses fought an army and raided them in Numbers 31, killed women and children and kept the virgins for themselves, these weren't human babies and children. He completely ignored this, right? He tried to claim they were something other than human. Completely ignored it. He then said, there is no benefit of knowing Jesus' early or teenage life, right? He says, name me any patriarch who you wrongly call prophet with as much detailed fabrication as Muhammad. He's going back to Muhammad. So basically his argument again is there is no benefit of knowing Jesus' early teenage life. He says, I already explained everything I needed to. Don't quote mine, evil Bible and your dour pages and waste my time to answer every little... Okay, so he's actually backing down. I mean, he's on the ropes now. He's clearly on the ropes. He says, when God places judgment on people or nations, more than adequate amount of time are given for them to turn away from their wickedness. And in this case of the Israelites, it was 400 years. When judgment was made, it's already too late and nothing is spared. So my response to him, to the Christian, is, I already answered. It seems you're not paying attention. Jesus, unlike everybody else, is a God for Christians. How can you see God's 30 years on earth? It's not important to be recorded. Thank you for agreeing that your God is not important. So and then this is addressing his question about, how it was apparently justified that the God of the Old Testament started killing people and it was all fine because they were evil. I said, so you punish children by sticking swords in their tummies because their parents did not turn away from wicked ways for 400 years? And I addressed him to say that even his Christian apologist colleague, friend David Wood, was at least honest to say that the Old Testament makes him feel uncomfortable. And actually, we'll grab that video and we'll put it below this video. Thomas then replies back saying, you're so inconsistent. Did God wipe out children or not in a flood, plagues and other periods of judgment? I like it how you're bringing up children to make an emotional argument. Apparently it's an emotional argument. And so my basic response to him was, he compares sending a flood to specifically ordering an army to stick swords into babies, making sure they're dead. So the Christians got absolutely no idea here. And of course, our brother Akil made the argument that Jesus was indeed responsible because he was the one that made this command of slaughter of these men, women and children. And again, the Christian makes a bad argument. He's trying to compare floods and so forth to specifically sticking swords into babies. And so there you have it. We have an Old Testament God who is completely barbaric and, and basically he has no argument. As you see, you can read his whole last post. He was completely silenced, completely debunked. He went on other topics and so forth. He did not address our objections, and there you have it. That's his last post. So in conclusion, folks, as you can see through the exchange with the Christian, he couldn't stay on topic, and when he tried, he failed miserably. I mean, I can't see how he can't understand that this Jesus is meant to be the God of the universe. His life is missing before his ministry. I mean, he's mentioned at birth, and I believe he's also mentioned at his baptism, but that's it. That's all. You don't have anything else in his teenage life, in his early adult life, absolutely nothing. I mean, was he a criminal? Was he a serial killer? What was wrong with him? And, you know, we have other historical records telling us he was a bad person. I mean, if he was a good person and the Christians disagreed that he was a bad person, why don't Christians give us who he was? It's obvious that Christians have rejected historical records who show Jesus in a bad light, and they can't show us who Jesus was. Maybe he wasn't this brave, good person. You know, David Wood, a Christian apologist, says it was really bad, this God of the Old Testament. You know, he had problems with him. He felt really uncomfortable. But then David Wood says, oh, this Jesus comes in the New Testament. He's now a God of peace and love. But then we only see that this peace and love in the last 3 years of his ministry. But what was he before that? Was he peace and love? Why can't we see that? Why do Christians boast and say they have 5,000 manuscripts, yet a complete biography is missing for 30 years of Jesus' life? Doesn't make sense, does it? So I believe they're hiding things, right? Maybe the God of the Old Testament coming in the New Testament wasn't so great. But anyway, we know that Jesus in Luke 19:27, according to Jesus' second coming, he's going to slaughter the unbelievers. And this is according to John Gill's Tafsir. So, I believe with certainty that, this is poor testament. This is poor record keeping. When a Christian boasts about how they've got all these manuscripts, they've even got a chapter called the talking Balaam, the donkey that talks. But yet, Christians have recorded that, but a donkey talking, but nothing in the last 30 years of Jesus, nothing recorded. And this guy's meant to be God, can you imagine God coming to the world and not having, no one really paying any attention or importance of his life? So, doesn't make sense. Christianity is really badly attested, I must say.